Thanks, guys. Thank you. Hey. So this is really special to be here, and I have to tell you, I have a little story about the Strand bookstore, which was I had this. I parked my my old Geo Metro XFI out on Broadway. This is 20 years ago, and my favorite guitar was stolen, like right out there. So go Strand. Okay, so here's the special part. Here's the real story. All right. So this is now 7.5 years ago. Okay, and I was working on this TV show that I co-created called Jericho, and there was an actress in this show, Jericho, named Darby Stanchfield. Does anybody know the show Jericho? I'm not assuming anyone does. Okay, all right, a couple people. Okay. So yeah, it was like a nuclear bomb goes off, and it's, you know, it's a disaster show basically. And so, you know, when you do a disaster show, you have to kill characters, and I'm Catholic and very guilty. And so whenever we had to kill a character off, I was always very sad. And I felt guilty. So anyway, Darby we had to kill off her character, and I was like, I feel bad, I'll take you to dinner and we'll become friends. And so a couple months go by, and we're buddies, and she says, oh, my friend Liz is an author, and she is working on a novel in this class, and she loves your book. Your book actually made her want to be a writer. And would you meet her and talk some shop? I said, great, of course, I would love to. And so we met for lunch, and we talked for several hours about writing and other things. And so to kind of cut to the chase, we got married. And so, but for those of you who have the book, I gave that quote that's on the back of that book before we were boyfriend girlfriend, so it is legit. But anyway, you know, when I think back to the Perks of Being a Wallflower, which has meant so much to me and to my family, and the idea that I would not have a daughter, I would not have a wife, I would not have anything had I not written it, had it not inspired her to write, had she not written a beautiful novel. And it's one of those things that even though we've talked about many times, even though you know, we do art for its own sake, or we do art to touch people, sometimes it's amazing how it'll lead to just a better life if you follow your dreams. So anyway, very, very proud to introduce my favorite author, Liz Maccie.
That's a good introduction. My God. And thank you all for coming out. I know it's wet and cold and uncomfortable out there, and that's really amazing. I know people drove from really far away, and it really means the world to us. So thank you. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I met him and thought he was really cute. I was like, oh, shoot. He's so cute. This wasn't supposed to be about this. And it's funny, my friend Wayne, who is over here, I called him on the way home. Oh, he called me. He said, how'd the writer meeting go with that writer? I was like, I think I'm going to marry him. It just like completely... Yeah. I don't even, and we didn't actually see each other again for a few months. Mm-hmm. So that was weird, but us women, we know. Yeah. we know when we know, and we know.
Yeah, you do, yeah. And we men, we catch up. So listen, so what we'd love to do is, I'd love to read a little bit from my book, and then Liz can read a little bit from her book, and then we just love to have you all ask questions, and we'll do answers. It's always much more fun that way. Is that, would somebody, I don't have a copy of mine, actually. May I read yours? Thank you very much. Thank you, I appreciate it very much. So people ask me, and they've asked me over the years, what's my favorite part, you know? And you're actually marked very close to it. Here it is. And I always say that it's the Secret Santa, when Charlie and Sam first kiss. I loved writing this in the book. I love writing it in the movie. I love filming it and editing it. And I don't know, it's just one of the special things that'll always touch me. So here it is. December 21st, 1991, dear friend. Wow. I can paint the picture for you if you like. We were all sitting in Sam and Patrick's house, which I'd never seen before. It was a rich house, very clean, and we were all giving our final presents. The outside lights were on, and it was snowing, and it looked like magic, like we were somewhere else, like we were someplace better. It was the first time I'd ever met Sam and Patrick's parents. They were so nice. Sam's mom is very pretty and tells great jokes. Sam said she used to be an actress when she was younger. Patrick's dad is very tall and has a great handshake. He's also a very good cook. A lot of parents make you feel very awkward when you meet them, but not Sam and Patrick's. They were friendly all the way through dinner. And when dinner was over, they left so we could have our party. They didn't even check on us or anything, not once. They just let us pretend it was our house, so we decided to have the party in the games room, which had no games but a great rug. When I revealed that I was Patrick's Secret Santa, everyone laughed because everyone knew, and Patrick did his best impersonation of being surprised, which was nice of him. Then everyone asked what my last gift was, and I told them it was a poem I read a long time ago. It was a poem that Michael made a copy of for me, and I've read it 1,000 times since because I don't know who wrote it. I don't know if it was ever in a book or a class, and I don't know how old the person was. But I know that I want to know him or her. I want to know that this person is okay. So everyone asked me to stand up and read the poem, and I wasn't shy because we were trying to act like grown-ups and we drank brandy, and I was warm. I'm still a little warm, but I have to tell you this. So I stood up, and just before I read this poem, I asked everyone if they knew who wrote it to please tell me. When I was done reading the poem, everyone was quiet. It was a very sad quiet, but the amazing thing was, it wasn't a bad sad at all. It was just something that made everyone look around at each other and know that they were there. Sam and Patrick looked at me, and I looked at them, and I think they knew. Not anything specific really, they just knew. I think that's all you can ever ask for from a friend. That's when Patrick pulled out the second side of the tape that I made for him and poured everyone another glass of brandy. I guess we all looked a little silly drinking it, but I didn't feel silly, I can tell you that. So as the songs kept playing, Mary Elizabeth stood up, but she wasn't holding a suit coat. Turns out she wasn't my Secret Santa at all. She was the Secret Santa to the other girl with the tattoo and the belly button ring whose real name was Alice. She gave her some black nail polish that Alice had her eye on, and Alice was very grateful. I just sat there looking at the room, looking around for the suit coat, not knowing who could possibly be holding it. Sam stood up next. She gave Bob a handcrafted Native American marijuana pipe, which seemed appropriate. More people gave more gifts, and more hugs were exchanged, and finally it came to the end. No one was left except for Patrick. And he stood up and walked into the kitchen. Does anyone want any chips? Everyone did. And he came out with 3 tubes of Pringles and a suit coat. And he walked up to me, and he said that all the great writers used to wear suits all the time. So I put on my suit even though I didn't feel like I really deserved to, since all I write are essays for Bill. But it was such a nice present, everyone clapped their hands anyway. Sam and Patrick both agreed I looked handsome. Mary Elizabeth smiled. I think it was the first time in my life I ever looked good, you know what I mean? That nice feeling when you look in the mirror and your hair's right for the first time in your life. I don't think we should base so much on weight, muscles, and a good hair day, but when it happens, it's nice, it really is. The rest of the evening was very special. Since a lot of people were going away with their families to places like Florida and Indiana, we all exchanged presents with the people we weren't Secret Santas for. Bob gave Patrick an eighth of marijuana with a Christmas card attached. The 90s. He even wrapped it. Mary Elizabeth gave Sam earrings, so did Alice, and Sam gave them earrings too. I think this is a private girl thing. I have to admit, I felt a little sad because other than Sam and Patrick, nobody got me a present. I guess I'm not that close with them, so it makes sense, but it still felt a little sad. So then it came to my turn. I gave Bob a little plastic tube of soap bubbles because it just seemed to fit his personality. I guess I was right. Too much was all he said. He spent the rest of the night blowing bubbles at the ceiling. Next was Alice. I gave her a book by Anne Rice because she's always talking about her. And she looked at me like she couldn't believe I knew she loved Anne Rice. I guess she didn't know how much she talked or how much I listened. But she thanked me all the same. Next came Mary Elizabeth. I gave her $40 inside a card, and the card said something pretty simple. To be spent on printing your fanzine, Punk Rocky, in color next time. And she looked at me funny. And then they all started to look at me funny except for Sam and Patrick. I think they all started feeling bad because they didn't get me anything. But I don't think they should have, because I don't think that's the point, really. Mary Elizabeth just smiled and said thanks and then stopped looking at me in the eye. Last came Sam. I've been thinking about this present for a long time. I think I thought about this present from the first time I really saw her. Not met her or saw her, but the first time I really saw her, if you know what I mean. There was a card attached. Inside the card, I told Sam that the present I gave her was given to me by my Aunt Helen. It was an old 45 record that had the Beatles song Something. I used to listen to it all the time when I was little and thinking about grown-up things. I would go to my bedroom window and stare at my reflection in the glass and the trees behind it and just listen to the song for hours. I decided then that when I met someone I thought was as beautiful as the song, I should give it to that person. And I didn't mean beautiful on the outside, I meant beautiful in all ways, so I was giving it to Sam. Sam looked at me soft and she hugged me, and I closed my eyes because I wanted to know nothing but her arms. And she kissed my cheek and whispered so nobody could hear, "I love you." I knew that she meant it in the friend way, but I didn't care because it was the third time since my Aunt Helen died that I heard it from anyone. The other 2 times were from my mom. After that, I couldn't believe that Sam actually got me a present because I honestly thought the "I love you" was it. But she did get me a present, and for the first time, something nice like that made me smile and not cry. I guess Sam and Patrick went to the same thrift store because their gifts went together. She took me to her room and stood me in front of her dresser, which was covered in a pillowcase with pretty colors. She lifted off the pillowcase, and there I was, standing in my old suit coat, looking at an old typewriter with a fresh ribbon. Inside the typewriter was a piece of white paper. On that piece of white paper, Sam wrote, "Write about me sometime." And I typed something back to her, standing right there in her bedroom. I just typed, "I will." And I felt good that those were the first 2 words I ever typed on my new old typewriter that Sam gave me. We just sat there quiet for a moment, and she smiled, and I moved her the typewriter again, and I wrote something. "I love you too." And Sam looked at the paper, and she looked at me. "Charlie, have you ever kissed a girl?" I shook my head no. It was so quiet. "Not even when you were little?" I shook my head no again, and she looked very sad. She told me about the first time she was kissed. She told me that it was one of her dad's friends. She was 7. And she told nobody about it except for Mary Elizabeth and then Patrick a year ago. And she started to cry. She said something that I won't forget ever. She said, "I know that you know that I like Craig. And I know I told you not to think of me that way. And I know that we can't be together like that, but I wanted you to forget all those things for a minute, okay? Okay. I want to make sure that the first person you kiss loves you, okay? Okay." She was crying harder now, and I was too. Because when I hear something like that, I just can't help it. "I just want to make sure of that, okay? Okay." And she kissed me. It was the kind of kiss that I could never tell my friends about out loud. It was the kind of kiss that made me know that I was never so happy in my whole life. Once, on a yellow piece of paper with green lines, he wrote a poem, and he called it Chops, because that was the name of his dog, and that's what it was all about. And his teacher gave him an A and a gold star, and his mother hung it on the kitchen door and read it to his aunts. That was the year that Father Tracy took all the kids to the zoo, and he let them sing on the bus, and his little sister was born with tiny toenails and no hair, and his mother and father kissed a lot, and the girl around the corner sent him his Valentine signed with a row of X's, and he had to ask his father what the X's meant. And his father always tucked him into bed at night and was always there to do it. Once, on a piece of white paper with blue lines, he wrote a poem, and he called it Autumn, because that was the name of the season, and that's what it was all about. And his teacher gave him an A and asked him to write more clearly. His mother never hung it on the kitchen door because of its new paint. And the kids told him that the Father Tracy smoked cigars and left butts on the pews, and sometimes they would burn holes. That was the year his sister got glasses with thick lenses and black frames, and the girl around the corner laughed when he asked her to go see Santa Claus, and the kids told him why his mother and father kissed a lot. His father never tucked him into bed at night, and his father got mad when he cried for him to do it. So once, on a paper torn from his notebook, he wrote a poem, and he called it Innocence, a question, because that was the question about his girl, and that's what it was all about. His professor gave him an A and a strange, steady look. His mother never hung it on the kitchen door because he never showed her. That was the year that Father Tracy died. And he forgot how the end of the Apostles' Creed went. And he caught his sister making out on the back porch, and his mother and father never kissed or even talked. And the girl around the corner wore too much makeup that made him cough when he kissed her. But he kissed her anyway because that was the thing to do. And at 3 a.m., he tucked himself into bed, his father snoring soundly. That's why on the back of a brown paper bag he tried another poem, and he called it Absolutely Nothing, because that's what it was really all about. And he gave himself an A and a slash on each damned wrist, and he hung it on the bathroom door because this time he didn't think he could reach the kitchen. That was the poem that I read for Patrick. Nobody knew who wrote it, but Bob said he heard it before, and he heard it was some kid's suicide note. I really hope it wasn't, because then I don't know if I like the ending. Love always, Charlie. Thank you. Thank you. You know, I want to tell a quick story because it's just too sad if I don't tell this story, because it's a very nice story about that poem. So, When I was living here in New York, I was on 108th Street between Broadway and Amsterdam, 209, apartment 6 to be exact. And really strange because my name is still on there. I haven't lived there in, I think, God, 15 years. My name is still on Buzzer 6. Anyway, I wrote my book in this little bedroom. I'll repeat the address if you ever want to go and check it. I was just, okay, great. So, no, it's all good. It's all good. Thank you for your. Yeah. They're very comfy chairs, but they're very hard to stand up from. Anyway, so I was writing my book in my little bedroom, and I was trying to think of what would Charlie give Patrick as the final present, and I looked up, and a copy of that exact poem was on my wall, because it's my favorite poem of all time. And everything that Charlie says about it, it was the legend was it was some kid's suicide note and everything else. That was the legend about it, because my sister had given me the poem when I got back from college, and I love the poem so much that I thought I'll just put it in my book, and then if my book ever sells to anybody, other people will know this beautiful poem. So anyway, when I was lucky enough to get a publisher, they called me and said, listen, you have to find out who wrote this poem, because you can't, it's illegal and all that stuff, and I certainly didn't want to, infringe anybody's rights, so I went on a hunt. So I called my sister. This is pre-Google. Google, it would have lasted, terrible story if there were Google. Just like in my movie, people go, how could they not know it's Heroes? I'm like, there was no Shazam. Just, shut up. Anyway, so I call my sister, who calls the person who gave her the poem, Pat Como, who calls his mother, who gave him the poem because it was in a thing from their youth group, because they were a very Catholic family. And then she looked at all of her old archive stuff in the garage, and she finds all these boxes, and she finds the poem finally in this little leaflet from this youth group, and it was edited by Dr. Earl Room. And I heard the name. I said, okay. And he was Denver school system. I called the Denver school system. Is there a Dr. Earl Room anywhere in the... Oh, he's long since retired. Okay. Let me leave him my number. If you could find him, it would mean the world to me. And it was a Friday night. The 0 hour was coming because I needed to get these rights. And the phone rings, 11:30 at night, and I answer it, and it's like, hello? It's like, hello? Yes, yeah, this is Dr. Room. You were looking for me? I said, yes, sir. I'm so glad that you called. You edited a thing with this beautiful poem. It's my favorite poem of all time, and there's no one wrote it, or like, who wrote it? And he's like, oh, I did. And so it was never some kid's suicide note. This man had dedicated 50 years of his life to educating young people, and he'd finally hung up his spurs. And what was so amazing about that, that phone call is when he said, I did, I literally burst into tears, because this was my favorite poem I'd ever read. And I was so moved and so relieved to know that the beautiful soul that wrote these words did not choose to die. And I will always take that as an enormous story of hope and courage. And anyway, the final thing to say was that Dr. Room said, you probably want rights and stuff, right? And I go, yeah, yes, that would be wonderful if you could. He's like, oh, don't worry about it. Just send me a thing. I'll sign it. It doesn't, because he wasn't looking for money. It wasn't like, oh, MTV's publishing it. Oh, well, I'll fleece them. It was, let's just spread the message and let's help young people, because that's what he spent his entire life doing. So anyway, I share that story just so nobody will be sad to think that it was some kid's suicide note, because it wasn't. It was just a beautiful man's legacy. So there you go.
I've heard that story before, and it's always amazing. Do you think he's still alive?
No, actually. He passed away a few years ago, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I always leave that out.
Oh, sorry.
Because I don't want anyone to get sad, There you go.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah, but but he was, when he did pass away, I didn't want to bum you out, so I never told you. No. Well, you wouldn't believe the outpouring from. I mean, because he was a legendary figure in the Denver school system, and he was. Yeah, I mean, you know, they'll name things after him. He's that man. Okay. Yeah.
I guess I'm up. I find this so nerve-wracking, so bear with me. We've done a couple of these, and each time, you know, since my book is so new and people haven't read it yet, I've picked different parts of the book to read to try to see what kind of feels right. And so I was going to read a part that I haven't read yet at one of these signings, just to see. It's more of an earlier part in the book, and basically just to let you know what the book is about is it sort of it all happened. My favorite movie is Perks of Being a Wallflower, of course. It really is. But my second favorite movie is Breakfast Club, and I always I love that movie because I love how everything happens in one day. And I mean, I know this is kind of an obvious thing to say, that, you know, your life can change in a day, but I particularly feel at like this age, you know, in our teens, that our lives can like really change in a day because we feel things in such a immense, passionate way, like all the time. So in honor of the Breakfast Club, I decided, I really want to write a book that happens all in one day, and that to really sort of that kind of moment in our lives where we go from being like children to being like adults. And sometimes these moments happen because of the people we meet or the experiences we happen, and it's just that black and white thing where like all of a sudden we're in a gray area and we're not children anymore. So this follows this girl, Roberta, who is sort of going down the bad path her freshman year in high school, and so her parents decide to take her out of the public school she was going to and put her in a private school. So it all takes place on her first day of school, and this is the part of the book where her brother is, and this really did happen to me. My friend Suzanne's here who can attest to it. Her brother's driving her to the school. So that's this part right here. Okay. Anthony, her brother, Anthony had on his favorite worn white t-shirt and jeans. The t-shirt is paper thin and has small holes forming around the neckline, but my brother refuses to get rid of it. He says the chicks dig it. Anthony is really very handsome, a strong Italian jaw, dark brown skin, and piercing blue eyes. He's also crazy obsessed about working out. With his high school graduation money, he bought one of those all-in-one gyms. My mother makes him keep it in the garage. His favorite thing is to make his shoulders and biceps really buff, because apparently the chicks dig that as well. Anthony glanced at the directions my mother had scribbled down on a McDonald's paper napkin. Looks like we go 4 more blocks, take a right at the light, and we should be there. He caught me biting my nails. What are you so nervous about? I spit out a tiny piece of cuticle. I just don't think this is fair. I mean, I don't know anyone at this freaking place, and Christine is at West Orange High, and she said that Meadowbrook is a horrible and snobby place and that I'm never going to fit in. Well, Christine is a stupid idiot. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Anthony stopped at a red light. Besides, you can make new friends. I don't want new friends. I slumped down in my seat and looked out the window. I could see a piece of the fence that surrounded the Essex County Public Reservoir. Nobody's gonna like me anyway. Anthony glanced over at me. The light turned green and we started to move. I could feel him wanting to say something, but what could he say? He knew I was right. I never had much luck at making friends. I was always the girl who ate lunch alone or sat with the teacher at the front of the bus during field trips. It was horrible. Even the geeks and nerds didn't want to be seen with me. Christine was the only person who ever gave me a chance. I had been fat, like obese, my entire life, and kids from elementary school would torture me on a daily basis. Then between the summer of 8th and 9th grade, my mother put me on a diet, and I lost close to 40 pounds, and I grew some breasts. My doctor said it was also latent puberty, but my mother insisted it was her chicken cacciatore and prayers to St. Jude that did the trick. I'm not gonna lie. The beginning of freshman year at West Orange High was horrible. I was alone, just like in middle school, except the building was bigger. And then it was at the painfully boring homecoming dance, which my mother forced me to attend, where I met Christine for the first time. I was sitting by myself, and this girl with short black hair, torn jeans, tons of ear piercings, and a tight red tank top came up to me. "You're that fat girl, right?" she said. I was so uncomfortable I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. "How'd you lose all that weight?" I shrugged and said sarcastically, "Lipo." And to my surprise, Christine laughed, but she wasn't laughing at me. She was laughing because she thought I was funny. She stood there with her hands on her hips, streamers and balloons framing her body. Kids that I had hated my entire life were effortlessly dancing behind her like they never called me fat ass or pig or loser. The DJ put on a new song and announced that this one is for the ladies. "You want to smoke?" Christine asked me. A perfect blonde girl in a strapless pink dress who once poured peaches on my head in front of the entire 7th grade danced past with her perfect blonde boyfriend. 2 minutes later, I was out in the parking lot and Christine was teaching me how to inhale. Since that night, we were inseparable. School became less miserable, and when we would walk down the halls together, I felt invincible instead of feeling invisible. I'll admit, for some reason, all that hurt from being picked on turned into anger with Christine by my side. I stopped doing homework, and my grades fell from straight A's to C's and D's. I wouldn't tell my parents where I was, and then I'd purposely come home after my curfew, and if anyone told me not to do something, well, I would do it just to piss them off. I started getting into fights with other girls at school, and I wound up giving this one girl a bloody nose. When the principal asked me to explain my actions, I said, "Shit happens," which got me suspended for 2 weeks. The truth was, I didn't know why I had hit that girl specifically. I guess when enough people make fun of you, after a while, all their laughter just sort of sounds the same. Christine would still call me names like ricotta ass and whale butt, but she was just joking. Even though this would hurt my feelings sometimes, I never said anything about it because she was my friend, and I was too afraid to lose her. So weird. Thank you.
That was great.
Oh.
It was. I'm sorry. It really was.
You have to say that.
No, I don't. I really don't. I you know, you kill me, but I don't have to. But I want to, and I love your writing, as you know. So you know, guys, it's sweet when it's an intimate group, and look, swear to God, I've literally lost count the number of times I've sat in front of folks and talked about work like this, and Liz is just getting started in this as well. It's very exciting. So feel free to ask any questions. And when I say any questions, it's not just about perks or lessons, but you know, I'm sure there are people here who are writers or artists or people who want to do different things, and it can be about your work as much as it can be about ours. Trust me.
TV or film or
anything.
Any
so,
of the stuff that
so I'd love to. Any questions you have, I'd love to answer them.
Hi, Liz.
Hi.
How much of the book is you?
That's such a good question. I mean, like, it's so funny because rereading it now, when I look back on it, I've done a couple of like blog tours, and that question had been asked, and I really had to sit with it, and it's like, it's so much me, like terrifyingly so, in the sense of like the overall story is definitely me. Like I was not heading in the best of directions, and my parents took me out of the school I was going to and put me into this private school, and I fought it tooth and nail. And I mean, to the point where like my mom, they threatened to have the police bring, they called the police the morning, which is in the book, the morning of my first day to bring me to school because my dad was friends with the local police officer. So like I was going to show up, you know, to high school in a police car because that's fashionable and comfortable. But really what's interesting is the emotional stories within it. Each of the there's 3 main characters. There's Roberta, and then she meets these 2 friends, Annie and Mervyn. And like I said, in rereading it and stuff, it's so interesting how so much of me is in each of them. And I guess that's, I mean, a pretty, I guess when we write, even when we write fiction, I mean, that just happens because it has to happen, because that whole old adage, you know, write what you know. it's like even though we're writing fiction and we're writing through these created characters, it's like it's coming from somewhere, right? I mean, along with our imagination, you know, our truth, and so it's a lot of me, maybe more than I even thought.
Did you ever punch a girl in the face?
Yes, I did. Micah Gottesman, who was like the most loveliest girl.
Was she really?
Yeah, now good question. We're Facebook friends. I should ask, but it's so funny. It was like because I was a really angry. I went through a really like angry stage, like this girl does, and that's such a fun question. And I just remember I was in band. I played the flute. Of course, I played the flute, and she was a friend too. And I don't even know what prompted it, but I like threw down and said like, "Let's meet after school in the playground." The entire school came out, and I totally gave her a bloody nose. And it's so funny, you know. Like when you think about like your regrets, I like still to this day regret that. Even though I mean, God, now as like a grown woman, I remember writing her on Facebook years ago, being like, "Do you remember that time that you know?" And she was like, "Yeah, you gave me a bloody nose. How did I?" And I like profoundly apologized again. But it's just funny how you know, like when you feel that anger, you're like looking to take it out on people, which is not, if you don't have the right way of dealing with pain or hurt or anger, it comes out in strange ways. So, Micah, I got it.
Well, it was a great chapter. So there you go. Micah, you gave for your art.
Poor Micah. I played the flute too, but I didn't punch anyone out. Okay. I have not read your book yet. I got it here.
Oh, thank you.
The portion that you just read, it was really visual. So are you thinking ahead to doing what Stephen did and making a screenplay?
That's a great question. These are great questions. I'd love to. I mean, I work predominantly in television now, and you know some film, but mostly television. And I was approached about maybe turning it into a television show, but I don't know where. I mean, I guess it seems so contained. You know, it seems more like a film if it were to be something, but a television show would be fun too to kind of figure out. So yeah, I would love to. I'd love to, and since I work in that medium now, it would be fun to sort of adapt it. I would love to adapt it. That would be, what a trip. I mean, did you enjoyed Adapt, right? Or was it just hell?
Yeah, it was hell, you know. I mean, it was, the writing the screenplay was, as you know, because you were there, but making the movie was like one of the great true joys I've ever had. Yeah. Yeah, it's that writing the screenplay part. Oof, that's tough. Yeah.
I just want to comment on, it was your book. I never felt so many emotions in my life. Like, Roberta is such an amazing character that I was crying my eyes out and then laughing. And it just, you know, I always say this about Liz, is that she believes in you more than you even believe in yourself. And Roberta, even though she's angry at first or upset, when she meets these two characters, she believes in them and sees their potential, and it's so beautiful. There is so much of you infused in Roberta, which makes this such an emotional story. I mean, it's really, and as far as being very visual, the way Roberta puts her thoughts together makes the most beautiful pictures in the world, because it's so specific. And
there you go.
And I think it'd be a great TV show. I also think it should be a book series, because I didn't want to leave these characters when it was over.
That's so kind.
It's a great question. Great question. Fantastic. Really, very insightful.
I have a question for the creative process. Now, when you get an idea in your head that you want to write a book, or you have an idea that, you know, it's something you would like to write about, what's the harder process, starting it or finishing it?
That's a great question. It's, you know, look, it's the same. The truth is, starting something is because there's nothing but there's nothing but a blank page ahead of you. But finishing it it's hard to let go because there's nothing but a full page behind you. And it's, it's all, it's birth and death. It really is, So I'd say it's equally difficult.
See, I'd say finishing. I don't know. It's like, you get that excitement, you get an idea and the spark of an idea, and then the possibilities feel infinite, and you just, it just kind of pours out of you, and then you'll get like halfway, and you'll be like, oh shit, I don't know I don't know the rest of this story. Like, so finishing is always so much harder for me, but and letting go. It's funny because when I do things, I see a pattern in my process that I often, my first draft, I'll usually rush the ending, almost because it's like you don't want to let it go, and you don't really want to fully quite deal with how you have to end something, because it takes so much to end something, and I mean emotionally, So I often have to go back and really rewrite the latter parts of my work than the beginning parts seem to need more help. So I'd say finishing.
Sure. And you, yes?
My microphone.
Oh, great.
I'm not sure it's on. Between like the first drafts and the last draft, how much did your story change? Like, how much do your characters and your plot completely change, or do they mostly stay the same?
It really depends on the story. It's funny. Are you a writer as well? Yeah. Well, then you probably say the same thing. It's interesting how. I remember when I was writing Perks, the novel, I thought of the title when I was in college, and I just kept turning over this idea, I had this one image in my head of this kid and these two older people who became like surrogate parents to him, and the safety that he felt just walking with them. And it was that and the tunnel in Pittsburgh where I'm from, and the idea of this aunt. And that's all I really had. And so what I found over the years, it's interesting, you start with these images that are so important to you and that you become obsessed with them. And the idea of like just this kid walking with these two older people was, it's one little paragraph in this entire book. It's not the most memorable, it's not even close to the most memorable, and yet that was always my true north for what this book was really all about. But I think things change, and what I found is it's really good to have some. Here, I'm sorry, I'm being so inarticulate because we woke up at 5 in the morning and just so tired. Anyway, 2-year-old. You know what it is? I believe you start every story with an obsession, or with a series of obsessions, and one of them is wrong, but it will lead you to the right way. And there's a moment where you have to let go, and you think, oh my God, how could I possibly cut what this is all? No, it wasn't what it was about. It was the Trojan horse that they tricked you into writing about the real thing. Yeah. That obsession it's a smokescreen. And it's taking, I'm 44 now, I've written a lot of things, and I finally, just now, I'm almost waiting for it, whatever I'm doing next. There's always something. Like right now I'm writing Beauty and the Beast for Disney, and there was this one idea that I had of like, oh, it's got to be this thing, and I literally, legally can't say a word about it. But there was this thing, I'm like, oh, that's what it's about. Yeah, that's going to totally bring them together. It's going to be beautiful. And then no, it was a phantom, and you just let it go. I love it. It's one of the joys of writing.
Good. It's funny because I think that I feel like this might sound, but like the heart of each character, I feel like that rarely changes, for me at least. Like that essence of who that person is like, I feel like it's there from page one. It's just like, you know who they are, but then they just get bigger and fuller and deeper. But if you go back to like the first page you wrote, it's like, it's still that girl or it's still that boy, like, that it's just that energy that they contain. It's almost like capturing lightning in a bottle, and then you get to like dating someone. Like writing is kind of like dating your characters, not in a weird way, but like in a non-creepy way. Like you all of a sudden, like there's this one character in my book named Mervyn, and again, from the moment when I knew his heart, I knew who he was inside, who his person was. But then all of a sudden, I was writing this one story about, that he like takes a Viagra, and I was like, oh, I don't know that he would. Wait, no, he totally would do this. And all of a sudden, like this new part of him, like knocked on the door and was like, hey, I also have this side to me. So
I wonder what part.
Yeah, that's
well done. Well done.
It's just like stuff like that I think you get to like know them better, but you kind of always know who they are from the beginning, I think, a little. Yeah.
I also add one little, since you're a writer, as kind of a writer-to-writer thing. There's no such thing as perfect, literally. It doesn't exist. It's impossible. And because actually perfect, I've heard that this thing, perfect is the enemy of great, which I love that quote. But I'll say for me, okay, so I was a young author and I'm writing Perks, and I'm trying to, in part one, I couldn't make him, he sounded off a little bit. Like I couldn't, people have asked me over the years, does he have Asperger's? Like what's going on with Charlie in part one? And the only thing that's going on with Charlie in part one is that I was not a sophisticated enough writer to make him sound a little bit more right, okay? And then in part 2, 3, 4, it's I got better as he got better, and it clicked. So then you learn and you go back, and I'm trying to clean up part 1. I'm trying to make it perfect, and everything I did made it worse. It didn't matter. It was like, you know what? It's supposed to be a little bit clunkier. Because even though, as a writer, or as an author, or as a person with standards or whatever, I want it to be, no, it's supposed to be clunky because that's where he is, because that's what the book is. You know what I mean? And let it be as truthful as possible. See? Oh, great.
Hi.
Hello.
I have a question for both of you. It's actually a two-part question.
Oh, good.
The first is, how long did it take from ideation until publishing? And if at any point during your writing careers, if you encountered writing block, right, how you got through that, what inspiration, what triggered the completion of the projects?
From the idea to publication, I was 21, let me think. Okay, so I was writing a novel in my senior year of college, and it was a very angry first-person coming-of-age novel, and it wasn't right, and the kid wasn't right, but at one point the kid says, I guess that's one of the perks of being a wallflower. When I thought that was my title, and I stopped, and the 70 pages it took me to write that sentence, I scrapped. I said, that's the kid, it's the wallflower. I don't know who he is, but I have to know who he is. That was November of 1991. My book was published January of 1999. And from 91, the fall of, to when I actually started writing it was the summer of 96. And that's what I mean, going back to the obsessions, you're thinking about, it's the tunnel, it's the kid. What does the wallflower mean? I love this phrase, but what does it do? So that was mine.
Yeah. What about writer's block?
Oh, writer's block. Well, I believe now that there's no such thing as writer's block. That I believe that it just means you're just editing too fast. It means like you're putting the cart before the horse. And so, but it took me a long time to get to that, because I remember, God, I'm going back now 10 years. One of the reasons I've jumped around so much in my career is that I would start to get in my own head, and I became my own worst enemy. I was like, I write a novel, and then I oh no, I'm going to write movies. Oh no, I'm going to write television. I kept jumping around, trying to trick myself into now just this belief of don't edit, just write, and then let time or trusted colleagues tell you what's good and bad, and don't judge it anymore. That's what I believe now, and that's all artistic, and it doesn't matter. All artistic endeavors, The worst movie you ever saw in your entire life, someone worked really hard on it. You know what I mean? It's like, whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah, go ahead.
That's it.
Well, for me, I wrote the book in probably like 8 months time around there, and this like 8 years ago, and I went out with the book, and everybody, it was right at the craze. Everyone was like, I don't understand, nobody's a vampire. And I was like, oh, what? Oh God. And you know, is there an apocalypse that happens? Can someone come back from the dead? And can it be a trilogy? And it's just, and like, it was really heartbreaking because, you know, it's just this little character-driven story that it couldn't find a home anywhere. And I had a really wonderful agent that really believed in it and really stuck by me. And we freaking went everywhere. I mean, we really tried and tried. And I mean, people really responded to it, but then it just was like, everyone was sort of looking for the next Hunger Games or the next Twilight. That's just, and it was a wonderful lesson for me for the long haul to go, you know, this industry, everything is in ebbs and flows, everything, you know, because, you know, vampires are starting to get old now, right? I mean, and it won't. In another 10 years, they'll come back. And I remember someone saying, it might have been you actually, that said, just hold on, just hold on, and it'll happen one day, because, you know, what was old becomes new again. And to just, that's where I think the tenacity of, you know, you get so many no's, and you want to give up, to just be like, I'll wear someone down at some point. And I did. And so I wrote it in, you know, roughly 8 months, but then it took about, I mean, we've been together, I mean, about 8 years. So it's, you know, because the market started to look for character-driven stories again, like stories like Fault in Our Stars, like stories like, you know, Looking for Alaska, and our dear friend just published a book called Love Letters to the Dead, and, you know, stories that are, you know, more driven by, you know, not supernatural things. Right. And then for me, I have found with writer's block that I think that you're editing too fast is brilliant advice. I think that's very true. And for me, I also think that, in all honesty, I think it's, when I've experienced writer's block, it's because I'm not working on the right thing for me at that time in my life. I remember just the worst writer's block I ever had. I was trying to write this story about this neighbor of mine that was a Holocaust survivor, and I mean, she played basketball to save her life in the ghetto. I mean, her story is exceptional, extraordinary, magnificent. And I couldn't get a page out. And I would sit down every day and like try to write this story. And finally I went, oh, I'm just not supposed to be writing this right now. I really believe I'm supposed to write it at some point, but I think I had to mature a little more and maybe become a mom, which I have in the last few years, you know, to be able to, you know, kind of get in there deeper. And so maybe if you're having writer's block, maybe put the thing aside and find something that comes out easier. Yeah, you know, it's sure. Kind of the thing. That's great.
For sure.
All right, I think we have time for maybe one more question.
I probably won't use this, but thank you. So it really makes sense, like what you're saying about the vampire movies, mm-hmm. because my question is about when you were in development for The Perks of Being a Wallflower film, mm-hmm. what kind of joys, but then also what kind of challenges did you have getting it made? Because it didn't have vampires in it, and it didn't have, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but it had Hermione, which helped a lot, you know. You know, here was my thing with Perks, because Liz's story is very common, and it was mine too. I remember back in '90, when did I finish the second draft? '97. And I looked for an agent. I couldn't get an agent. I had a film agent, but I couldn't get a book agent to represent it. And I remember this one guy, he did nonfiction, but he wanted to be, and then I'll jump to the movie, because that's really your question. But it's related. And the guy said, basically said, you know, YA's dead. This was the quote. YA is dead. If The Catcher in the Rye were written today, I don't know what would happen with it. It's in your lap right now. Yeah. And I remember hearing that quote. I was like, that. It seemed foolish to me. It makes no sense, you know. And but you know, I couldn't nothing for a year, and then it just really kind of a fun story. And you can ask me, I'll sign whatever. I'll tell you the story about how it did find a publisher. But what's funny is nobody knows anything, and they say, oh, it's not. This whole genre is dead. No one wants to read this shit anymore. No one cares about this thing anymore. You hear it over and over and over again, and you go, you know, I mean, my God, my book is published in 37 countries. There's like 4.5 million copies floating around in all these languages, because no one, you know what I mean? They didn't know. Nobody knows. So using that, I found the movie much easier to do than the novel, because I knew the business a lot better. I was older, and I also knew how to just build a family. See, look, development in Hollywood is you write a script and they note you to death, and you know that's the process. And they rewrites. That's fine. I'm living it right now. It's paying the bills. I'm having a blast, actually. I will go home after this and write Lumiere. I can't wait. But this was different, and I knew through my experiences in Hollywood that I had to do it very deliberately. So I wrote this script, and Liz can attest. I didn't sell it. I had offers for a decade, and I said no, 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 because I knew that if I sold it before I was ready, that some very nice, well-meaning person, executive, not a bad person, would go, my boss is feeling very uncomfortable. Can you make the aunt not have, like, abused him? Because it's not going to happen if that happened. I knew it. It was just going to, no. And I was like, no, I can't do that. I can't. It is what it is. So I made some money on Jericho, and I wrote it until it was pretty much perfect, I thought. And then you go out to the 10 producers, and 3 said, yes, we'd like to do it. And then you meet with them, and the guys that produced Juno are the perfect fit. You go, yes. Then they give you notes. But you're in the driver's seat now, and their notes are smart, and now your 125 pages is now 120, and it's better, and then you go and you cast it and you build the family. So what happened was, I had Logan Lerman, who was Percy Jackson, who, you know, all over the world. I had Emma Watson, who was Hermione Granger, all over the world. And they were phenomenal young actors and wonderful people. And it was this family that went out. And it was Emma Watson going to all these people. Like, it still took 8 months, which in movie language is like that. I mean, to get a movie made, from the time it's like, okay, here's our team, to we're on set, was 15 months. That's lightning fast. And it's just because I built the structure the right way. You know, and so for anybody, are you a filmmaker? Is that what you're asking? You know, you write just control it as long as you can possibly control it. And don't ever sell your baby. Not the baby. You sell a lot of stuff. But not the baby. Don't ever sell the baby. So, unless you guys got if anybody, especially to fellow writers, artists, whatever, is there anybody, one more question, we're happy to answer it. Otherwise, happy to sign. And just, anybody? Go ahead, buddy.
I have a question, but I have a quick story, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. I saw your book when I was 17 in a bookstore in Thailand, that's where I'm from. And I read it, and I loved it. And a year later, I gave it to my best friend, and she loved it. And when it was time for us to graduate, she gave me a photo of her. At the back, she wrote, "Tonight, we are infinite." And she read me the poem that you just read. And I don't have a book. I didn't know you guys were here. I walked out of my therapist, and I did a story. And I saw your names. And I just want to say thank you.
Oh, what a beautiful.
Well, I will buy you a book, sir. And I'll buy your friend a book, too. Why not? Yeah, you're very welcome. What a lovely way to end. So thanks, everybody. We think. Oh, and by the way, really quickly, so we can share the applause, because I did not know she was here earlier. And there she is. When I was reading my letter, Erin Willamy, who played Alice in my lovely movie, there she is. She's in the corner, and give her a big round of applause. Yay! Thank you, guys. It was wonderful.